Hi there. Happy half hour, everybody. Here's a toast to everyone. Welcome to joining us on the very right in Chicago. We're starting. And we have a little bit of a reverberation. Is that only with Fritz or is that with everybody? Okay. I'm just going to keep going. And I just wanted to start real quick with a note. It's a kind of a sad note. We just learned a little bit earlier today of the death of TV newsman Dick Johnson. What a gracious guy he was. What an amazing newsman he was, and how lucky we were to have him in this town. So, our sympathies go out to his television family as well as to his family, but definitely a man who left us way too soon, and we were grateful to have him while he was here. What a great newsman. So I wanted to move today to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been going on with the museum. During this time where we've really been talking about how important it is that Black Lives Matter. We wanted to talk a little bit about the exhibit that we've had in the museum called Stay Tuned. Stay Tuned is an exhibit that we were lucky enough to get. It was on loan from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And one of the things that struck me the minute I saw the exhibit was that it really is one of the, it emphasizes the change that television brought in the African American music community and rock and roll. It has so many artifacts that tell that story and tell the story of how those voices were elevated through television and sometimes left out. And so we've asked the woman who actually put together the exhibit from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to join us today. Karen, I'm so glad that you're here.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. Hi there, I can see you. Fritz, thank you so much for engineering us today. We really appreciate it. But Karen, it's just wonderful to have you here, wonderful to talk about this exhibit, and wonderful to talk about how the synergy of these two industries, television and rock and roll, really how they came together. Let me just talk a little bit, if you would you tell us a little bit about your background? Because this is an exhibit that really came from the two worlds that you come from.
Yeah, it comes from my favorite things, music, television, and telling stories. So this is the perfect exhibit as far as I'm concerned. And as I spent about 17 years at the Television Academy working at the Archive of American Television, where we interviewed, did oral history interviews with all the people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, the guys that were creating TV in general, telling the story, having the people that were there tell the story about television. And it went from, again, from the 1940s all the way up to, I was there until 2014 when it came to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where I'm chief curator and president. So again, it's a really great way to talk about both things. And the really cool thing about rock and roll and television is that they both kind of started at the same time, right around 1948. It's that magical year where a lot of television really started to go into homes all across America, as well as rock and roll really breaking. Also, I think it was also the first year that the LP was born. So a lot of great things happened right at that time, and they kind of grew up together, as you can see in the story in the exhibit.
So I wanted to just give people who haven't seen it, and unfortunately right now you can't see it, we're not open, but the overview of, it does take these two industries starting in the 1940s, and really what is fascinating in the way you kind of open it is by saying that, when they started, they were really counterculture type of things. Television was trying to take over for the home friend of radio in everybody's lives so that it could perpetuate itself. And rock and roll was, has always raged against the man, right? It's always been that form of art that's going against popular culture. And in the 1950s, all of a sudden television looked around. It had somewhere in the neighborhood, I think you say 7 million people around the country who had televisions, and they were thinking, as any industry would, we're not going to last if we don't get those young people. And oh my goodness, don't they like that music? Um, and so they actually went after rock and roll really to start populating different shows. And one of them was the variety shows that we all looked at. I think we're gonna go to that in a minute, Fritz. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about Ed Sullivan. Ed Sullivan actually had a great eye and really appreciated African American talent at a time when we were talking about, the Jim Crow segregation. People weren't even allowed to go in the same entrance. And he was, not only did he have the superstars on, the black superstars such as Louis Armstrong and Pearl Bailey and Sammy Davis Jr., he went much deeper into the pocket. And he would have, I think he had Peg Leg Bates, Pygmy Markham, and Tim Moore, and all of Bo Diddley and the Platters, and Fats Domino, which weren't necessarily considered mainstream music, right? So he went out of his way to really elevate and perpetuate Black musicians as well as Black talent. And then we came along to, and there was a bunch of other shows such as that, right? Hollywood Palace, etc.
Well, actually, Sullivan was sort of the first. And I think what's important about Sullivan is that he was the one that, first of all, he treated everyone the same, whether he was messing up their names or whatever. He didn't, he didn't treat Africans or anyone any differently than he treated anybody else, which was really important for mainstream America to see. And then the other thing is that he also to just show talent from all different sides so that he could appeal to everybody at the same time. And of course, this was a time when there basically three choices of networks. So he really wanted to get the most people that he could, and that was the way he could do it. Yeah, but he really, his musical taste, the Beatles, of course, but then on the, for African Americans, he really started to bring in the Motown acts before really there was even Motown, which was really interesting too. So he had his finger on the pulse of America in a way that, most people didn't even know.
He really was just promoting talent and was looking for, and took a lot of heat for a lot of the things he did, which is fine. But he ended up, I think one of the big moments with Bill Bojangles Robinson was on there, and he actually went out and put his arms around him and stuff, and he ended up actually paying for his funeral at one point. And he said, he wasn't a guy of many words, and he didn't seem like somebody who was really warm and fuzzy, but he did speak out about this and say that as a Catholic, I can't stand by while there's injustice, and I won't perpetuate it. So one of the heart of at the heart of this exhibit are incredible artifacts, but also one of the things that I love about them are the videos that you produced, right? Okay, I'm frozen. So I'm not sure if I'm coming through, but I'm going to keep talking. Um, the uh, uh, the videos that you produce that tell these stories are just amazing. They're really wonderful. Can you speak a little bit about how you put that together? That is because that is one of the big things about this exhibit that makes it so rich.
I really wish I could show some of them, but what we did is we actually asked a few artists to talk with us about their experiences, and then there's the tour guides for the whole exhibit. They pop up in a lot of different sections of the exhibit. So we have Kevin Eubanks from The Tonight Show. We have Darlene Love. We have Paul Schaefer, Cyndi Lauper. So, and then we also dug back and actually pulled some interviews from the Archive of American Television, where I was, which I'd produced. It was kind of fun to actually incorporate. We had Kurt Loder in there, and Steve Binder, who did the Elvis '68 comeback special. So we did have a lot of really wonderful video pieces that we were able to mine for this as well.
And one of the things that I think, I'm so sorry, that as we come into the exhibit, Darlene Love says in one of these interviews, she said that when we got to, and I think we have American Bandstand up there, which was really an iconic, really. That comes in the middle of the exhibit. You have these are some of the artifacts from actually the set, right? And we have Dick Clark's white mic there as well, which I found hysterical. That is a mic just painted white with house paint.
That's where I said she was going to rule the world. That's the mic she spoke into for that.
So she talked about if you were an artist and you got on American Bandstand, you were kind of set, weren't you?
Yeah, and the same could be true for Sullivan as well, for a lot of those shows. Now, the other thing, I think Darlene said it as well, was that it was really important as we're talking about African Americans on television. It was really one of the few times where African Americans could see other, artists, African American artists on television, and it was like a hope because it's like they could see themselves on the screen, which for many years you could. So those shows actually opened up, an entire world to these people, to be able to see someone who looks like you doing what you want to do.
Mm-hmm. And the American Bandstand was, I think, one of the things in one of the interviews talks about how while it did do that, it did really stick more towards mainstream artists. Isn't that accurate? Or is that? Yeah. And so one of the wonderful places, and we in Chicago love to, that we were the home of a Soul Train, which started at WCIU, and Soul Train became a place where it elevated so many different artists dancing, and the Soul Train. I can't even do it really well, but we would all do that, and I can't ever remember being at a party where there wasn't lines so people could come dance down the island there. It really also made made music, and it just elevated these all great funk music, which was not mainstream. Can you talk a little bit about Soul Train and what it meant to people?
Oh, it's such a great show, and not only that, but you also, I'm hoping somebody did for the 50th anniversary, which is this August. It actually started in Chicago 50 years ago. But that show really, Don Cornelius, it was his brainchild, and it was really, in a weird way, it was almost better than American Bandstand in a lot of ways, because it was not as engineered. It was more, it felt really fresher in a way. Not as, if an artist wanted to actually not lip sync, he would let them live and all sorts of wonderful things. And the dancers, it was just a show that had so much life in it for so long. And it was really, really important to our popular culture. I really think that it just brought so many art into the mainstream as well.
The dancing was phenomenal, and the people who, I did not know that Rosie Perez started there. So many different interesting people started by dancing on the set at Soul Train, and so from then on in, as we move through the exhibit, you were talking first about, again, these variety shows, and then we moved to some of how rock and roll really became its own entity, right? On different shows, on different variety shows, like the Sonny and Cher show. We had instead of a personality like Ed Sullivan or a Don Cornelius hosting the show, we had the music celebrities hosting these shows. And I was going through this the first time, and I was like, I totally forgot that Johnny Cash had a variety show. The Man in Black himself had a variety show. I think you've frozen right now, so I'm going to keep talking. And I think that the guests that ended up coming on, I think the Darlene Love, as I quoted her several times, was just great in really talking about the history. She became, just such a great voice. She also became the face of Christmas on the Letterman show, and she ended up singing the song, I think it's "Baby Come Home for Christmas," for on Letterman's show for the last time during his last show. We have the iconic red dress that she wore. When we're talking about how late night also moved and perpetuated. There it is. There's the dress with David and camera. There you are. Are you back with me?
I am.
Thank you. You're frozen a little bit. So we moved. to to talking a little bit about the again the late night shows and the work that it did to because it also late night you could do you could do a little bit more adulty acts, if that makes sense. So they didn't have to be all so how important were late night shows in elevator
Really,
music?
I mean, they're really important because they were just right. I mean, they're, practically live. So, I mean, you really had, the freshest takes on people, on what was going on at that moment on these shows. So, Letterman, Carson. Carson wasn't really there wasn't a lot of rock and roll on Carson, quite frankly. But, Leno, Letterman, all those guys, Jimmy Kimmel, all those guys really embraced rock and roll much more.
Yeah, letter. I think of, Johnny Carson is the comic man, the
Yeah.
one that you yeah the comic.
Yeah, very few big rock acts on his show.
So some of the other artifacts that we have in here include the first outfits that the Jackson 5 wore on the Hollywood Palace show in 1969. We just passed that 50th anniversary of the Jackson 5 appearing there.
That photo doesn't quite do it justice because those suits are like this great chartreuse bright green. I mean, it's a fabulous, they're fabulous outfits, and that was their first. They actually had one performance at I think the Miss Black America pageant, but that was a syndicated show. But this was their first national appearance, was on the Hollywood Palace. Diana Ross introduced them as sort of as her find, but really brought them into the national consciousness.
And then we move on to something. We have, of course, Stevie Wonder. And can you tell us a little bit about this? This is just a great outfit.
Yeah, it's an outfit from, I can't remember which Super Bowl it was. Maybe you have it there in your notes, Susy. But again, it shows the importance. Rock, the Super Bowl, as a matter of fact, when it first started, I mean, they didn't have these giant rock acts. It was like, Carol Channing. It was people that you would never have dreamed would be the Super Bowl halftime act. But then when it became a real thing, it became huge. And that Stevie Wonder performance is really, really amazing. Fantastic performance. And all the other one, and just after that, you had Prince, you had Michael Jackson, and you just had all these wonderful acts, really, really doing these amazing things in a very short amount of time. The stages had to be built in like 7 minutes, and they're full stages. I mean, it's really an incredible production, and these artists really have to be on their game to do it right.
So what I love is as you move through the exhibit, then we get into an area. So we go through the variety shows, we go through the shows that celebrities hosted, then we go through late night shows, including SNL, etc. And then we go into this whole thing where, instead of the two industries working together, television just kind of takes it over, takes over music and starts with shows like the Monkees, who came onto the scene because they were decided that they would be the TV place, right? And the Partridge Family and then all the cartoon shows that that developed all of these all of their own. They co-opted the industry themselves instead of some of the cartoon shows perpetuated, like the Beatles. I don't think a lot of people who know we had a Beatles fest to celebrate the anniversary of them being on the Ed Sullivan Show a couple months back. And what was great is the cartoons. I didn't know that while there were different characters voicing the Fab Four, the music was the all original, which was pretty amazing. And then we move into this area where we're also talking about the talent shows. The talent shows that we started Arthur Godfrey, and then we move all the way to today, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's the more things change, the more they stay the same. You had this Arthur Godfrey was doing it even on the radio, and now we're still seeing it with American Idol and all those other great shows. So yeah, it's here to stay.
And we I think it's very interesting, as someone pointed out, and I think through the exhibit actually, in one of the interviews, where we're talking about this is where we meet. We had when we had the three networks, we had these nights where everybody would be watching the same thing, or chances are pretty good you could have that water cooler moment where you actually saw something that the others saw. Now we are so diversified with digitization as well as cable television, you name it. We all could be watching, we could be doing the Netflix series that you did last year, as opposed to us having something to talk about when you watch it. But these shows, these competition shows, especially the music shows, The Voice, etc., those give us those moments where we are all as families seated around the table. It kind of returned us to that. Does that sound about?
That's a great point. That's a really, really great point. And also the music that they choose, because it goes everything, a lot of the music is some of the classics or music that we haven't heard in a while by artists that maybe aren't, in the public eye right now, and they're bringing some of that great music back. So it's kind of cool to see that as well. Or to see some of those artists actually participating in those shows and talking about their music and then singing along with the contestants. It's pretty cool.
And then the exhibit moves into the last part of the exhibit, at least is set up at our museum, is really goes into the MTV world. And it's so funny. I have two boys who are 20-somethings, and when they were in that room, they were like, "But Mom, this ends where it all began," because for them, that's where it began. But it's fascinating for people to realize the import of MTV and how it took all of these things from for artists. It was kind of, I love the way Loder describes it. Kurt Loder describes it as the Wild West of and the artists that we have in there. You do the expressions in there. It's a real collection of amazing artifacts in that area. Can you speak to?
Yeah, it really is. And the really cool thing about it too is, and we didn't really talk about this about the whole exhibit, but it also gave music and rock and roll a visual representation, not just of seeing the artist, but seeing what they're wearing, seeing how they move, seeing how they play their instruments. So I think there's with music videos, it was a whole palette. Now these artists could then tell stories in music visually. So it changed not only what people were seeing, but it also or listening to, but also what they were seeing and who was kind of coming to the top. Some of the more interesting artists, who did some really cool video pieces, could get a lot more attention, even though their music was maybe not the best or was different. So it actually changed how music was sort of coming up to the top. Aha is a really great example of that. That video, Take on Me, is so, my interpretation is so good. It's my favorite video ever. But is the song, if you listen to it on the radio and experience it that way, would you really love it as much? But every time I hear the song, I see the video in my head, and so I think that's very, very true for a lot of those music videos. Is that it really was like a launch pad for these artists that were just so creative visually as well as musically.
And so many people don't understand that when it first debuted, people were horror struck. That was not supposed to be what a music was for. That was supposed to be left in your imagination. People were not supposed to interpret the songs through visuals. It was, that was the real pushback from a lot of the critics. And then we moved to the point where we have somebody like Michael Jackson who does this huge film. It was a film. The showing of the Thriller was a momentous occasion, and it was I can't remember how many cameras it was, but it was a huge production, and taking that whole art, it just opened up the whole idea of music and seeing people in front of you as well, and how you could interpret it in so many different ways.
Martha Quinn, one of the original VJs on MTV, she was one of the people that we also interviewed and for this exhibit, and she talked about that too. She said, when we first started, there were like 22 videos that we just had to keep refreshing, and they weren't, they didn't have that artistry. But when they kind of figured it out and said, okay, we need to really tell stories in the music videos, that's when things really started to balloon. And Thriller's the best example of that. It really is.
I love the whole idea that and I think that she is also the person who said this, that no matter who you are as an artist, no matter what age you're in, no matter what era we're in, the same thing, the challenge is always the same. When I make that music, how do I get it out to people? How do they hear it? How do they see it? How can I go from my garage to your life? And again, that influence of television, where it was able to take it. I think we have one more artifact that I really just have to show, and I want to show, because it's one of my favorite in the exhibit. It's also, I think, the one that is most insured. Highest level of insurance, because how can you replace Bob Marley's hat?
Yeah, that
Hmm.
is a fantastic piece, and we're very lucky. That's actually part of our permanent collection, so I'm very, very happy that that's part of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's permanent collection. It was from Is This Love, and it's iconic. I mean, it really, really is. And there, on the museum perspective, there are very, very few artifacts related to Bob Marley. So again, I feel very fortunate that that's now part of our collection. And that video is it's a wonderful video, wonderful song.
It is. It is. It is. It's just one of my hearts. We are going to. I don't know when we're going to be opening. Do you know at all when the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame will be opening?
Yes, I do. And as a matter of fact, we are opening on Sunday, June 15th. I'm sorry, Monday, June 15th. Yeah, so a whole new world. We've done some major revamps. I think a lot of people, will be doing masks, temperature checks. We've got a one-way flow through the exhibits, so it's going to be safe, but also still, people will be able to see the exhibits and feel the music and connect with others that are feeling the music too. So we're really excited to be reopening, and hopefully, you guys will be too soon.
We're hoping. We're hoping. I think what's really interesting. I've been sitting through a lot of seminars about how we can all open safely, and I think it's fascinating to listen to how important museums are in terms of the cultural fabric right now, because many of us depend upon tourists, but these days we can pretty much see that the audiences that we'll be drawing from are our home crowd, right? The
Yeah.
people who, because there's not a lot of travel, and there's not, and we don't know when that'll happen. And so cultivating, I think it's causing museums to turn inward and look and make sure that we can cultivate and lead in our community. And so I think that's something that we have been talking an awful lot about. And so I would love to invite people to send us some ideas. This happy half hour was something that we wanted to start just because we actually wanted to just talk about other things other than the pandemic at the point. And at that point when we started it, and we wanted to hear other voices and bring other voices in here. And we wanted to utilize Fritz's great gifts in terms of putting us out there in broadcast, but we'd love to know what you would like to talk about out there. And so in the comments section, I'd love it if you could mention some things, stories that you might want to hear, things that you might want to explore about the impact that the broadcast industry, whether it's radio, whether it's television, whether it's digital, has had on your lives, your family. And we'd like to hear a little bit more of that. And we'll be looking forward to meeting you in Ohio and seeing the exhibit. And we were looking forward to you coming back here to Chicago as well.
Thank you. I think that we both have very important, our institutions have very important stories to tell, especially now. And I think it's a moment that we can really bring our communities together to talk about these things. So hope you guys are back in business soon.
We'll be online, where we'll be debuting this week a curriculum on the Great Debates. We've revamped a lot of the curriculum for people to look at the impact of television and digital and radio on the presidential election. We'll be talking about there's curriculum built around the pandemic and how television and broadcast and digital has influenced that. So we're trying to make sure that even if our doors are not open, that we're still there helping the community open our minds as to what's going on in the broadcast world. So that'll be up this week. I've talked about it a couple times already on here, and I'm really excited that hopefully schools will be using it in the fall. That's why we're debuting it now, so teachers can have access to it. It's for high school education. We are coming to the end here, and I want to be on time. I know that is very important. And I just want to remind people that perhaps if you would like to be seeing our crew again, if you want to sign up to be a member, we would love it. That's a way for you to support us. It's only $48 a year, but we will be giving you something that's worth about 140. We're giving you some history, links to all sorts of different classic radio shows that we have. And we'd also ask that you join us on Instagram at 5:30 on Friday for Aileen Bishop and Olivia Jackson, who will be talking about real life and actually drama TV and real live TV, which is the reality shows. I can't believe I couldn't think of that word. The reality shows on TV. Okay, guys. So thank you, Fritz. Thank you so much for joining us, Karen. We really appreciate your time. And thank you to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.